with, Georgette Green-Hodgett and Dawnita Brown. We have an exciting topic, and it's so relevant. I was looking in the news and I heard about John Amos. Remember John Amos from Good
Yep.
Times?
Mm-hmm.
And there were issues about his caregiver. And it occurred to me that there are so many people who are caregivers because our parents are getting older. If you're a Generation X or you're a millennial, you may be a caregiver to a family member who has some challenges, who need extra support. So I thought it would be great just to have this discussion, and I couldn't think of two more amazing people to have this discussion with. So I just want to start here about, tell me your experience as caregivers and what you feel like people should know about caregiving.
Georgette, you want me to
Okay,
start or
no
doesn't
problem.
matter?
I'm Georgette, and I am a 55-year-old living in Maryland, and I am happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I am really fortunate in that my mom, who I'm going to call Momsy, is really in good health. She is approaching her 89th birthday, and she stays between mostly at our home, but her home too. But of course, because of her age and some challenges in aging with memory and things like that, we feel it best that someone's with her when she wants to do that. And so I'm thankful that I have a amazing family, and we work together to try to help support her in her care, her immediate care, um, as well as taking care of her home, taking care of her resources, and allowing her to get those opportunities to spend extended times at her home, which she loves. So I'll leave it there for now.
I'm Dawnita Brown, and Georgia, I'm so glad that you shared that because so often as Black people, we don't identify as caregivers, especially like in the capacity that you're doing it. Like I'm helping my mother, she's independent, but we're still being there for her. Where with me, I am a sole full-time caregiver to my mother who is totally dependent, and she's Mama Jones. She requires total care. She is immobile. She had a brainstem stroke. She suffered a brainstem stroke in 2015, which left her immobile, cognitively impaired then. But I believe because of and what you're already providing with your mother, I can tell that you're going to allow her to age in place with dignity. You said she loves her home, so you'll respect that. My mother, she was in her home, but I had to move her in with me because she could no longer, care for herself. But nevertheless, she is home with me. She was in a facility
Mm.
where, like I said, the the side of, well, the what she suffered, is, I guess, from the stroke, the the cognitive impairment, like I said, being immobile, unable. Her
Mm.
left side is extremely weak. It's not paralyzed, but it's like she can feel, but she can't
Yeah.
voluntarily move it. She was tube feeding when she first came home. She's no longer a tube feeder. However, I keep her hydrated through her tube. She's taking food by mouth. So all of the things that the neurosurgeon said that she would not be able to do,
Mm,
she's doing
Oh,
because he said that most,
wonderful.
yes, that most folks that have a brainstem stroke are locked in. So all they do is blink their eyes. So the prognosis was not good. But I commend you and your family already for
Absolutely.
rallying around your mother and even taking on that role and wearing it proudly. Like, hey, I'm a caregiver.
Absolutely.
It's hey, I'm a caregiver. And
Yes.
it's okay because that's what we do in our community. But I'm glad that, we're identifying it so that we can get the supports that we need because we're underrepresented in that space only because we
Absolutely.
don't say, hey, we're caregivers and we need to be recognized as such. So
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because, we think about, getting our careers, we plan for marriage, children, retirement, and a lot of us don't think about the moment that you become a caregiver. That we don't think about our parents needing us that way and how we have to change our lives. And I remember reading something saying, when you have a child, at some point they're going to leave because they're going to age out. But when you're a caregiver, you're not quite sure when this will end, right? Because
Candace, it's interesting. Even when you're using the word caregiver, I feel like we've been caregivers to our families and they've been caregivers to us our entire lives. I think it's just
yeah.
that the shift has changed. And I know you
Mm,
feel it, Dawnita, when in terms of conversations and things like that. You're not, I've been doing this a long time, all those kinds of conversations. But I actually think we should be more integrally involved in our aging parents' lives earlier than we ever even thought. Because, like,
mm,
you never know the day when they're not going to remember everything, or you never know the day they're going to fall and get hurt. You never know the day. So it seems like I'm really happy you invited me because, in my experience, I feel like it was best early on we had those conversations so that
mm,
when it got to a place, and it's not that, my mom is not in a position where she doesn't know. It's just that her short-term memory is not as good as her long-term. But she can, she walks 5 days a week. She's in good health. And I think that those things, that's another reason why I'm happy I'm here. I think her doing those things younger and continuing to do it has what's provided her good health, good life, and you know, make her feel like she's not being cared for. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I think that's helped.
that's huge. So you recommend having that conversation early before something happens? Like, how do you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because like many people, especially our Black moms, right? They held it down and are holding it down, sometimes taking care of grandchildren and all kinds of things. And if the conversations aren't had earlier, I remember it was kind of like, well, why don't you let me help you organize all this stuff? That's how I started. Let me help
Mm,
you organize because I didn't even really know what she had. And I'm not talking about had so that I could be in it. But I didn't even know what she was managing, what she was monitoring. I didn't know how many bank accounts. I didn't know how many and that kind of stuff. And thank God earlier, I found out. And that was my entry point of saying, let me help you organize this. And I
oh,
have a binder, mom. And anytime you want to see it, you just ask me. But it's for your good. And it was the day that she got a little confused trying to do her bills when it was like the switch. It was like that day that you always say, "Oh
yeah,
my goodness,"
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, that's one thing, just we never know, and so it's good to kinda have the conversations. They're hard conversations, but they're
Absolutely.
important to help our parents overall and help ourselves because it's stressful if you don't.
Absolutely.
Mm,
And I totally agree with that because, like me, I was a sudden caregiver. And so finding out all those things on the back end, not having a power of attorney in place, not having and even for us to do now, an advance directive in
Mhm.
place, not having our most form in place. Like, how do we want to die? Do we want to be resuscitated? What do we want? Do we want to stay home?
right.
We don't want to be at a nursing home? Do we want to be on life support? Do we want a tube if we can't eat any longer? All of those those are very important, and even for us to
Mhm.
have, and like you were saying, Georgette, your bank accounts, all of that. When this happened with my mom, I was in Africa serving as a Peace Corps volunteer.
Mm.
So when you talk about life and life plans, God is like He plans how He wants to go. But when I came home, and again, she didn't have the cognitive ability. She was actually intubated for 9 days, so she was on life support, a breathing tube. And so she needs to pay, I needs to pay her bills and all of that. I was on her bank account as beneficiary, but not as co-owner. And I didn't have power of attorney. And so
Um,
that was a nightmare. Like, I initially started the guardianship process, which is, you don't want that. They appoint them an attorney, a court appointed attorney to them. You have to get your own attorney. If you are granted guardianship, you have to provide receipts. The courts are now in all of your business. And so, having those conversations early so that you can avoid of all of that. And then for me, I'm an only child. So I didn't have to worry about siblings. But then too, when you have siblings, to have these conversations, and like you say, Georgette, they're hard conversations because unfortunately we can plan out our life, but we don't want to talk about end of life planning, which is something that's inevitable,
Yeah.
right? The plans that you say you
yeah.
want to do, you want to get married. Well, I've been saying that for years. I'm 50, I'm still not married. I want kids.
Mhm.
I don't have kids. I'm good on that. But what I'm saying is, I'm going to die. Like, that's a fact. That's
Period.
Yeah.
that's not an option. So start planning early, having the conversations early. If siblings are involved, like I say, what does mama want? Everybody needs to be at the table, so that once, if God forbid, there comes a time where mama can't communicate, we all heard what mama wanted. And so we all have to, you know, honor her wishes and honor her. But when you don't have those conversations, it just gets ugly, really, really, really ugly, in families. And so I think that's very important. Very important. And to your point, Georgette, I mean, yeah, we've been caring. That's just in our DNA, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's why I say we don't identify as caregivers, because it's in our DNA. That's just what we do.
Yeah.
You know, that's just
Yeah.
what we do.
Yeah. I think something that, I know comes up even in my family, my husband's family, is not wanting to be disrespectful, not wanting to take power. Because for a lot of older people, it's been private. Like they've never told you what the bills were, and they're afraid that you're looking for something, and they don't really want you to know what they have, and they don't want to lose their independence to you. They don't want to be treated like children, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I know we've had an older family member who, is not making great medical decisions. So we're at that place where we're wondering, well, what does that look like to get guardianship, or what's the other thing? Power of
Power of
attorney.
attorney.
Yeah. Can you tell us what that process is? Because we're looking at that as well. And we're like, wow, we never thought we would be here thinking about that, because they're not making great living decisions, medical decisions. What is that process like, and what does it feel like emotionally to go through that?
I think the easiest one is the power of attorney, and I
I
know
agree.
Dawnita could talk about the guardianship a little bit more.
I don't. I
Um,
mean, I didn't go through it. All I would say is watch the movie "I Care a Lot" on Netflix, and you'll see how
Mm.
what guardianship is ugly. It's really ugly. I,
Mm,
And I want us to remember there's also the cases of children caring for disabled parents that are not elderly, right? So all of these people are part of this same conversation. But in terms of power of attorney, you have various means by which that, so for example, I'm my mom's power of attorney. This resulted again with a conversation between my sisters and my mom and I in terms of who's going to be the power of attorney, what will make sense. And we all went to the lawyer's office to take care of it. Again, I'm not saying we're a perfect family and we've done everything right, but through some of the errors or misunderstandings or conversations of the past, we've learned that communication really is the best way to go. So, in establishing the power of attorney, my mom has given me the right to tend to her affairs. But you can't assume that a power of attorney gives you access to all aspects of their life. So, for example, I was trying to be forward thinking, which I was glad I was, and I was like, well, God forbid if she ever needed Social Security, like if I had to deal with her Social Security stuff, how would that work? So I went to the Social Security office and I gave the power of attorney. They were like, we don't do that.
mhm,
There's a whole process where you have to get interviewed, you have to be labeled the kind of like the guardian. You would be like the official person who could access her funds, her accounts, and everything. There's all kinds of passwords and things like that. And I was really happy that at least was educated about what that would look like, because my assumption was that, like with her banking, I can give them the power of attorney paperwork. In some cases, like with one of her retirement accounts, it was like 2 months. They were like, okay, you're all set. 2 months. So again, it's about being early, asking questions. Um, Even in some ways, like, you know how we struggle with our passwords and we have 54,000 of them? Sometimes you have to
mhm,
set up even accounts for your parents for them, because so many resources are now available online only. So there's just so much to navigate. But being the power of attorney, because I have those documents, I can go in, I could take care. She's given me permission to take care of lots of things. There's also limited. It could be that maybe the children say you can only help with banking, you can only help with healthcare, but the form is extensive. And what I've chosen to do for my own peace and just to keep my family informed, I try to tell them all the moves we make, right? So if it's like,
that's it.
like for example, I'll give you an example. my mom says, go ahead and write you and Calvin a check for however much you want for Christmas. I said, oh, no, I ain't. Uh-uh. We're not starting that. You understand what I'm saying? But I said,
Yes.
you can write the check, like, because she can sign checks, but I'm not writing myself a check for nothing, not even to go to the
Mm,
mailbox, because you want everything to be up and up. You don't want there to be any questions, any concerns. But the power of attorney is just another person that can speak on their behalf legally.
yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Because one of the things that for a lot of adult children, we're not quite sure what the right way to do is, but we do recognize they need extra support. And I love the fact that, Georgette, you said, and I think you also said, Dawnita, you want to empower them to be part of that process,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's why so many adults who are vulnerable get violated, because people start taking
Mhm.
power and making decisions, and they lose their ability to have a say.
Danita, can I say one thing about that part? You know, I appreciate that they really are protecting elders and that you can't even call. If that power of attorney is now on file, they will say, I need to speak to your mother. She needs to be on the line. She
Yep.
needs to tell us these 5 things. They'll ask, they won't tell me the questions, but she
Mhm.
has to answer them before.
Mhm.
Is it okay that I speak to your daughter?
Yep.
And I think it's good. But
Mhm.
again, if you
Yeah.
had documents and things in advance in place, or in some cases, I'm trying to tend to some things for my mom because she worries and I don't want her to worry. So I can't even go on the sneak tip if I
Mhm.
haven't processed the papers properly. So all of these things have to be considered in advance.
Yeah, because like my mom, now, even like with Medicare, when I was trying to do things before, she couldn't do it. She didn't have the cognitive ability to do it. But now, like I called about her life insurance. That's another thing. It lapsed at a certain age once they live. So all of that stuff, knowing what you need to do in order to maintain it, are you going to let it go? Just all the things. So the guy was like, well, is your mother near you? I was like, yeah. So I asked, I said, Ma, and he asked her, is it okay? And she's like, yes. And then he asked her name and her birthday. When this first happened to her, she couldn't do that. She couldn't respond, so I had to make the decisions. And even with her, um, advance directive, there were some things that I said that once she could speak on her own, she was like, well, no, I want to be resuscitated. I want to be, so having the conversations early so that everybody is on the same page. And like you said earlier, Georgia, it's stressful when you don't know. And
Absolutely.
so it makes it easier. It's not like I'm trying to kill you off. I'm trying to, I need to do it for myself too, because, you want to make sure that you die, your end of life is how you want it to be. And so it's just having the conversation saying that we have to, you know, definitely have the conversation so that everybody is on the same page. It's
Absolutely.
nobody's guessing, nobody's word against this person's, because it's the person who wants it. It's their word.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we talk about the stress factor? Because one of the things that happens that when you take those roles, your whole life changes. Like I've had friends who are like, wow, we're empty nesters. And then the relative moves in and it's like, wow, when the nest is not empty, right? Because they're in that role. What is that like to have to change your life? What are some of the stresses and how do you manage that?
Well, for me, like I said, mine happened so suddenly and abruptly. I didn't have time. And Candice, you helped me through it when I first came home. I didn't really have time to process and think about what my needs were, because it was a crisis. It was so much that she needed, that she couldn't communicate. She couldn't make any decisions for herself. She couldn't do anything. So I was basically living her life through me and neglecting myself. So I say I was selfless, which is reckless, right? And
Mm,
so it wasn't until I got to a point where I realized, wait a minute, I'm depressed, I'm gaining weight, I'm just,
yeah.
not living my life, that I realized, like, there were times where I wouldn't leave her at all, because I felt like I had to be there all the time. I had to be on all the time. I couldn't let nobody else come in and step in until I realized, like, this is not sustainable and this is not healthy. And so I actually became a certified caregiving consultant. I started a support group for Black daughters caring for their mothers. I created my community, but I also discovered this philosophy called self full, which is that sweet spot between selfish and selfless. Because as caregivers, we feel selfish or, feel guilty for taking time for ourselves. And then on the flip side, was selfless, like I say, which is reckless, is not sustainable. So being self-full, like taking care of yourself so you could better take care of your loved one. And to that point, as I mentioned, we're not only underrepresented in the caregiving space, we're underrepresented in
Mhm.
caregiving studies. So there are studies that have been done around caregiver stress. And in terms of the numbers, you don't see a lot of Black people in it. So, part of what we're doing within my support group for Black daughters is we're participating in studies so that we can show that
Wonderful.
definitely this is some, depression, anxiety, stress. All of those are factors of caregiving. And so, what do we need for interventions for Black daughter caregivers? Because 1 in 7 women take care of their mother, right? And there's 25 million women taking care of their mothers.
Wow.
And then the average age is 49. And you think about children, you think about taking care of your parent, it's that sandwich generation. You think about me as a single person, hey, perhaps dating. It's a lot that goes along with it where we're trying to just provide care. So, what do we need to support us as Black daughter caregivers? Because our population is growing. Black people are living longer. I think they say by
Mhm.
2030, maybe I might be off, but it's going to be more 65 and older folks living than 18-year-olds. So it's going to be more
Mhm.
of us that are caring. So how do we care for ourselves so that we don't find ourselves, because the health outcomes for us, there's already a disparity, but even more so for caregivers. Just, I mean, globally, caregivers, you know, suffer. We're invisible. We don't have the support just as a community, but even well for black people and Black women specifically, it's greater. And so we're really working to, move the needle on that, to do better, to make sure, like I preach, be selfful, make sure you take care of yourself because she gonna be all right. She yelling now. She ain't going nowhere, right? She
And
can't
that's
do
It's
nothing.
real.
real.
That's
But
real.
guess what? I'm not gonna before I would run and go see what's wrong. And but I've learned she gonna be all right. So, even with that, like making sure that, like I said, I was outside because it's nice and I love my outdoor space and all of that. I've just learned to really take care of myself and prioritize my health so that my stress levels are decreased because it's inevitable. I mean, it's stressful. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just stressful.
I would say that when my mom's not at her house, she's at my house. And so there has been many years where I think that my husband's sons, we took on the responsibility as though we were the only ones having to do that. And it was when we
Mm.
had the conversation with the rest of the family, they're like, hey, we'd like to do this. And the fact is, and let me be transparent, it wasn't their fault.
Mm-mm.
We didn't ask. We have to speak up. We have to communicate.
Yeah.
And on the other side, they have to communicate. So I remember the summer where my mom was somewhere. I don't remember where she was staying. I think she was at her house. And she was like, I'm coming home early. And they were like, no, you're not. Because they wanted me and my husband to get time by ourselves. She was
Mhm,
getting ready.
mhm.
We had cleared the house. And then she talked about, here I come. They was like, they did dodge. They was like, well, you gonna come to my house for a few days and you gonna come, so I'm glad you talked about the statistics because what I feel with our family that we're doing, I think really well, we're including our kids in the support system
Mhm, mhm.
Yes.
because she's all of our mom at
Yeah.
different levels. So it might be I'm working, my son who's goes to school remotely, he's here. When I leave, again, she's not the kind that needs to be tended to,
Mhm,
but you want her to feel like she's not alone, of course, right?
mhm.
And she
Right.
doesn't want to feel that. But it's really the whole family. It's my niece from California that came and stayed for 10 days. It's all aspects of our family that pitch in, and that helps with the stress. So
Yeah.
from the time of us talking about it many years ago, myself with my siblings, then it became like, okay, what can we do? My sister that lives nearby might do the doctor's appointments, and I do the other stuff, but communicating. And then let's not do what our moms and grandmoms did and try to be the only ones that could do it.
Hmm.
No, let's help our aunts and help our cousins and things like that. And I will say this too. One of my aunts called me one day, and she just, spoke of how proud she was of me and what a good job. And she has no idea how much that meant to me, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing it for any applause or anything like
Yeah.
that. And I'm even getting misty thinking about it. But just the call and the thought makes such a big difference. So, if you know people in that situation, you can help. I think just encourage them and let them know.
Well, I'm gonna say this, and this is just being honest and transparent, Georgette. Your family is an anomaly. Like, I'm serious. Most
Hmm.
families are not like that. Most families is not everybody. Now, I'm not going to say that you don't get support. Most of my support come from my friends,
Mhm.
outside support. So I do ask, but I will say that y'all would be a wonderful poster children to put what,
Or how it should be
aging and
done. Yeah.
how it should be done. I mean, really. I mean, to is yeah, definitely.
I
I
think
would love for you to come and talk to my support
I'd
group.
love to, but I think it is because I think we realize, like, how fortunate we are that our mom is able, like, she doesn't look 89 years old.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
when even sometimes she'll say, "Well, I don't wanna do this," or, "I shouldn't have to." We're like, "But mom, we're here, like, you don't have to run these streets by yourself, like, you don't have to do it by yourself." It's great that you wanna be independent, which is like a whole nother conversation, right? Like, when she wanted to renew her driver's license, and I didn't want to renew it, but she really wanted it renewed. And I remember thinking, that's like the last thing of independence she will have, right? To be able to say, I could get a license, and if I want to get in my car and drive, I can. Now, from the day she got the license, she ain't picked the keys up.
Mhm.
But it's those things we have to think about. Like, she's still a woman. She still wants to be able to have her thoughts and opinions valued and considered. And it's so, like, sometimes you watch those videos and it looks like people are yelling at their mom or grandmom, but sometimes it could be rough like that. I haven't had that experience. I've had,
Mhm.
she's sassy, right?
Right.
So I get the sass, but I haven't had that. But I could see the potential in that. So we shouldn't judge people when
Right.
they're like, "Mama, sit down,"
Yes.
Yeah.
because sometimes it's like, "Mama, we do this every day at 4 o'clock. Why?" You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
So if anything, we should ask questions and we should offer help and not jump to conclusions.
Yeah. And it's interesting because what your experience is beautiful because there's a whole family community that's there to support. But oftentimes there's one child that does most of the work,
Yep.
or one relative that and they feel ashamed or guilty to ask for help, or they feel ashamed when they do ask. And people say, after all what your parent did for you, there's that feeling of you ought to, right? And people don't always put that time in. Very
Can I
isolated.
say something about this? One more. There's
Yeah.
there's the martyr that wants everybody to be like, because if it wasn't for Hazel, Mama
Mhm.
wouldn't be.
Yeah.
That's not helpful.
And like I say, yeah, in my case, I'm an only child. So, even though I wish I had, my aunt stepped up, everybody stepped up a little more, I can't be
Mhm.
angry or mad at anybody
Right.
because she is my mother
Right.
at the end of the day. And so, like
Yeah.
my neighbor across the street, he takes care of his mother, but he helps me to get my mother out. We have a chair that takes her up and down the stairs, and I'm just like, I don't know what we would do without him. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like you build your community if
Yes.
you don't have your family.
Absolutely.
You just have to build your community. Community is so important. And I think too that dignity, making sure when you were talking about your mother getting her license, it's about her dignity, you know. And like with my mother, even though she can't do anything, I make sure she is looking good, she's fresh, all of that. You know, make sure to preserve her dignity. Um, you know, even when it comes to how I have her room set up, I have her commode covered with fabric. I have like all her briefs and stuff away. So when you walk into the room, you wouldn't even know
That's right.
what's really going on with her, unless you knew. Of course, she's in the hospital bed, but other than that, because it's about aging with dignity.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think that's needing that respect. And also there's a part about being patient, because there are some individuals whose parents have dementia or Alzheimer's. And like I watched something recently where this gentleman's father is 91, and at 91 they take away your license, and he couldn't remember why he can't drive, and he kept asking the same questions, and I can see how his son was getting a little bit upset, right? But there's this thing about patience and taking care of yourself while you're taking care of them,
Mm-hmm.
because there wasn't a lot of help. He didn't have an outlet. People didn't show up. Same thing, trying to hide the keys, turn the stove off so that his father wouldn't try to cook. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that self care piece is an important piece. Can you share with us how you do self care as a caregiver? What's important for you?
And you were saying that, Candace, I was just thinking about the time. Most of the times when I snap at her is when I'm sleep deprived, I'm hungry, you know what I mean? I'm trying to get something done and she's worrying me. So again, that self-care piece is so very important. So like for me, I mean, I do my devotions every morning before I even get out of bed. I think because I have a routine in the morning. I'm not a routine kind of person, but the morning routine is definite. So I do my devotions, then I get her cleaned up and her medicine and all that. I do the morning care with her, and then I work out. If she's stressing me out, I go to another room, I breathe. I also make sure that I include respites where I get away. For maybe go on vacation, or even like I say, respite in place where I just go out back or out front, wherever. So I make sure that I do things that I love, gardening. I keep my space clear and clean. That helps me with. I look at that as self-care. I mean, it's so much more than bubble bath and nails done and all that, massages. It's so much more than that. Like every day you can't get your nails done, or every day I can't even take a bath every day. It's funny. I haven't had a bath in a very long time. I thought I was going to take one the other day, but then the day got away. I was like, oh, I don't have time to take a bath. Because when I do baths. Like I have my salts and my bubble bath, and I'm soaking full. And I ain't had that kind of time. I didn't have an hour and a half. But I mean, I think that and again, the community and having an outlet and having, I think therapy is very important. We look at, a lot of us look at therapy as, in our community, as you go because there's a problem. Not necessarily so. You go to get your annuals every year, right? You go and get checkups. It's the same kind of thing,
Absolutely.
to have someone that you can talk to that, you know, just objective. They don't, is no judgment, is no you should do that, none of that, right? Just somewhere to unload and to share and to, I think that's very important. So those are just, some of the things that I do to, I write. Sometimes I'm not a journaler, but sometimes writing does help with getting your feelings out there. So, but just making sure, however, whatever self-care looks like for you, to do it.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what you said. And I would also say I do have my husband and my son with us here. And I do go to work outside of the home, but I did make some decisions. I changed my career once the pandemic hit. We were all home. He was here with us for that extended period of time. And I made the decision to leave working in the school system I had been in over 23 years to, transition to another element of education because it allowed me some flexibility in my schedule. Because I was concerned about when we come back, right? How what will happen? I wouldn't want her to be here, with us during a period of time and then she's home by herself every day when really we were together for 2 years every day.
Mhm.
So I will say, definitely connect with people who love and support you. Definitely trips, bubble bath. Last night I was on my Cricket making my Father's Day cards and stuff like that. Like, find things that you enjoy to do. I love to sing, and I have a whole network. And even finding recently, before even Candace reached out, just talking to friends and relatives. I was on the phone with my cousin one day, just talking about who would have thought we would be talking about taking care of our moms,
Mm.
right? We were just kids, and now we have to do that and just sharing strategies and suggestions. But it made me think, if you don't mind, Candace, it was just two things I really wanted to make sure that I said, and Danita touched on it earlier. Um, Earlier this year, someone actually got access to my mom's bank account,
Mm.
and they were able
Mm.
to take out within minutes $10,000.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
They took out, uh, like, wire transfer, and the thing that saved us was that I put every possible alert on my phone for her accounts. So that I just really encourage you, especially those of you whose parents are living alone, they live far away, they're independent, they're like, "I got this, I don't need you," you know? Even, Cal's mom is still with us, and everything that we are doing is for their good, right?
Yeah.
But I am so grateful. I'm talking about I had email and text alerts, and that is the only reason we were able to stop catch it. And because we were able to do that, and because now with banks, if you don't put those security things on and something happens, it would be your fault. It says it in their documents. So put those things
Mm.
in your own accounts. Put them, it started in Zelle. They started with 100, 150, 200. Then they just did a boom, 9,000. Da, 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 da.
Wow.
So please do those things. And the other thing I would say is, we also have to keep an eye out on our neighbors. It might not be my mom, but my neighbor across the street is like my mom. We've lived here over 20 years, and her kids know if anything should happen is a concern, we got a key and we going across the street. And we have to do that for each other. We have to do that for, if think if we all did that for our neighbors, then our parents would be okay because there will
Absolutely.
be somebody with an eye out for them. So we have to do that. Shout out to y'all know y'all last name. I ain't gonna say it. But we got her back. And
I
we
love it.
as a community need to do that because we do, she has several children. They don't all live local. And I know it gives them peace. They have our numbers, we have their numbers, knowing that we have her best interest at heart too.
Mhm.
I love it. That's the village, right?
That's
Yep.
right.
Village comes together. And there's another part is check on your strong friend,
Mhm.
That's
right?
right.
The friend who's doing everything because sometimes they're crumbling inside and
Mhm.
they need someone to check on them as well.
Mhm.
Yep.
Did you want to say something, Danita? And thank you for that, Georgia. That's
Mhm.
powerful. Did you want to say anything, Danita?
No, I mean, I was just agreeing with George. George just said I have a neighbor up the street, one across the street. The one across the street is new, and her daughter couldn't get her one day. She called me. She was like, "Dawnita, can you see if my mother, that kind of thing."
Yes.
So, to your point, if you have seniors within your proximity, to certainly check on them. But I think just to, why you brought us here caring for elderly parents, I would say to Georgette's point, like earlier, be proactive. Um, it's something that we're all going to experience in some form.
Mhm.
Rosalind Carter, Jimmy Carter's wife, and she's actually now battling Alzheimer's. Which, yeah, she's battling Alzheimer's.
Mm.
He's in hospice.
Mhm.
But she said there are four kinds of people in the world: those who are caregivers, those who were caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need
Yes.
caregivers.
Oh,
I don't know if I said it in the right order, but those are the four kinds of people.
it's true.
And so I think, we just have to understand that that's a part of life's journey, however it comes. So, to be prepared. And like I say, Georgia, I commend you and your family, because y'all do it a little different. I mean, you would think that everybody, you would hope that, right? But I would say, like I
Mm-hmm.
say, y'all are definitely the anomaly. Yeah, more folks that are not like that than you are.
I think we just
Yeah.
assume we all. I feel like when I look at my grandmother, I never imagined the day she wouldn't be able to do, and she wouldn't be here, right? So I think we get that, but because we spent so much time, with her through the years and after her retirement, being between the two houses, it became like little signs. We were able to see it. I think that's the difference too. Like, because we would, she stay here a little while, go back to her house a little while. You start noticing her patterns, noticing things that are changing. So that's what probably made us more proactive than other people. But if you take
Yeah.
my advice, everyone, when you go visit your mom next, ask her some questions. Look at, is her house being cared for the same way? Is she remembering certain things? Is she remembering who she's talking to? Can she? I remember
Mm-hmm.
one time my mom accidentally wrote two checks to a lady at church, and the lady told me. But again, because she was near here, that people knew me. But if my mom was, completely at her house all the time, that would I wouldn't even know. So
Yeah.
please, please, please don't assume because
Excellent.
they're well and they're healthy and they're on a cruise ship and the bingo parlor that they're good.
But
Have the
that's the best
conversation.
time to have
Yeah.
conversations, when they are well.
Yeah,
Get that stuff in
Absolutely.
place, get stuff signed off on.
yeah.
That's the best time.
And have a will. Have a
Yeah,
will.
and there's so much that I've learned with estate planning. It's not just the power, like you said earlier. The power of attorney doesn't work for everything. It's not
Mhm,
effective for everything. Some banks don't accept it, like you said, Social
mhm,
Security. So having the trust is something that we need to talk about in our
mhm.
community. I can't speak on it, but an
Right.
attorney would definitely, I mean, set that up. And when you hear trust and hear like putting stuff, you think and it does take an investment to do it. But before, we thought you have to have a lot of stuff or own a lot of stuff or have a lot of money. But no, we need to have these things in place so that we could be the proxy for someone if they're
Mhm.
unable to make the decisions for
Yeah.
themselves. But
Absolutely.
again, that goes to being proactive about it. And like I say, even with us, I'm single, I don't have any children. My parents are still my beneficiaries on everything, even though my mother is really incapacitated
Mhm.
and my father has a treatable, not cure, is living with a treatable, not curable cancer. So if something were to happen to me, like maybe right after, then my stuff would, where would it go? So I
That's
mean,
it.
I think that we need to start planning as well,
Mhm.
so that we have things set up in place for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's part of this. I want it to end by you giving us some information about your organization, how people can find you for support, all that great stuff.
Oh, absolutely. You can find me at heycaregiver.com, is www.heycaregiver.com. And, everything is there. So we have the Bentu Circle, which I mentioned earlier, is a support group for Black daughters caring for their parents or who have cared for their parents. And it's for daughters specifically. And so we offer support to each other. Like I said, we're participating in research studies so that we can make a difference for the greater Black daughter community. But www.heycaregiver.com.
Awesome. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you, ladies, for being here. This has been an amazing conversation. And if anyone wants to see a replay, YouTube channel, Dope Black Therapist, if you're looking for a provider just for support, visit my provider directory called coloroftraumaandhealing.com. Thank you, ladies. You've been
Thank you
amazing.
so much. Thank you for having
Thank you
me.
for having me
Thank
too.
you. Good night.
Okay, have a good night.
Good night.